Hello and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues, a conversation of ideas. This week, our special guest needs little introduction. He's often described as one of the world's greatest living economists. Professor Amartya Sen is a Nobel Laureate for Economics, also a Bharat Ratna, currently Professor of Economics and Philosophy at Harvard University. He's also just brought out an updated version of his 1970 book, Collective Choice and Social Welfare, with 11 new updated chapters. Professor Sen, thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you.
And of course, we have with us a young audience as well of students. And Professor Sen, none of them were born in 1970.
No.
I was born in 1970. But tell me why you think this book and 11 new chapters is still relevant today in our current times.
Well, the first edition of the book, which were really based on my lecture notes in the Delhi School of Economics in the 1960s, was concerned with some big consistency problem had been discussed and really had a lot of attention, Arrow's impossibility theorem and so on, indicating that when you're moving from a collectivity of many individuals to one, what should be done or how should we describe it, then there are gigantic problem, the claim was, in putting the others together. So the first edition was largely to show why that need not be the case and how we could avoid it. But that was all. That was in a little bit of a silent world. People have their preferences. We are trying to put them together, and there was something slightly clinical about it, and that had its own discipline and concern. And the second, the added bits of the 11 chapters, many of them, deal with the discipline of public reasoning. And so that's this is a less silent world, and it may not always be as riotously loud as I believe things were yesterday in the Delhi University, but at least it is certainly a world of conversation, interaction, argument, counter-argument. And since I've taken a fair amount of interest on the argumentative tradition in India, it was also interesting for me to see how that impacts on the formal literature on social choice theory and what its implications are for things today. I mean, in India, in Brexit in Britain, in Mr. Trump's election in America, or the French election about to come, and so on, but very much on India.
So when you see that impact of today, and you talked, of course, of the value of the argumentative tradition, your earlier book, The Argumentative Indian, when you're seeing what's happening on our campuses today, what happened in Ramjas College, what's happened in Jodhpur University when a professor was not allowed to speak, and the counter-argument that these are views that are dangerous to the idea of the nation, or these are views that should not be allowed in an India which is patriotic. What would you say on this?
Well, it seems to me that the second view that you put forward seemed to me as wholly anti-democratic as you can think of. Democracy has always survived and prospered and flourished on expressing different points of view. John Stuart Mill defined democracy as government by discussion. And discussion requires you to be free to present your point of view. So if before the discussion you already said, let's not discuss, these points of view are completely non-acceptable, it's highly dangerous. I think what you are questioning is not only the opposition point of view, but the very idea of democracy. And that's really what is involved in these discussions. Of course, when it takes the form of violence, there's another dimension added to it, not only suppression of point of view, but also actually doing it through violent means. But even if it were done through non-violent means, the suppression issue remains important. But taking a different view about anything, whether it is what kind of government we should have, what kind of priorities in economic policy, whether demonetization is a good thing or a bad thing, and even what exactly should be one's thoughts about disputed regions, whether it be in any part of India. That question can come up.
Because I think the argument on the other side, as I made the point, is that the views that are not acceptable include views which say call for the breakup of India, and these are views that should not be expressed on Indian campuses.
Well, I think there are two things here. First of all, the many things that are suppressed and not thought to be anti-national are not about the breakup of India. So you don't have to advocate the breakup of India to qualify to be anti-national. You could reach that exalted status of being anti-national exceedingly quickly. So that's number one. And number two, if somebody wants to have an alternative structure of the world divided differently, there's no reason why that could not be discussed, as long as you don't impose that breakup view on the rest of the world. I mean, Britain has just gone through a big debate about whether Scotland should be independent. Were they arrested as anti-national? Scottish, and they're the majority of Scotland. I think they would have been regarded as outrageous if the Scottish nationalists were arrested. On the other hand, if we don't think it outrageous, I mean, as it happened, I was very opposed. I mean, I have a presence in Britain since I've spent a lot of my life there. I think the Scottish nationalists were mistaken. But to say that they should be arrested because they're being anti-national would have been an incredibly unacceptable and anti-democratic way of proceeding. Happily, the British, who had made a lot of mistakes, did not make that one.
In fact, I'm going to open it up to young students, and of course, from this book on your lecture, Delhi School of Economics, we have many Delhi School of Economics students also here. So, Karan Seth has a question. Go ahead, Karan, with your question.
So, sir, even though most economists feel that the damage caused by demonetization in the long run will far outweigh the benefits, Mr. Modi has gained great political mileage because facts and logic have been overshadowed by political speeches and sentiment. And frankly, the common man, the Aam Aadmi on the street, does not really understand the economics behind it. So are we correct when we say we're living in a post-truth world?
There are three things there.
Also, is that one of the reasons which qualifies you as anti-national, do you think, when you made that point? But even speaking anti-demonetization like you did, almost equals to being anti-national.
I did not know that I have been praised by being anti-national. I don't think, I've got a lot of adjectives, and anti-national may have been, maybe sedition might be next. But I have to think as to what are the most compelling denigrations that have been hurled at me. Anti-national, of course, I'm coming to your question,
yes.
But you must see gets priority.
Sorry.
She is the boss here, anyway. The anti-national, of course, assumes that there is one national point of view, and a point of view that's endorsed by pretty much everyone. Even a majority would not do, super majority, and a minority of 31%. Which many of the people describing others as anti-national have a party they have loyalty to. 31% certainly doesn't allow you the remaining 69 to be anti-national. So, you know, I think anti-national is a peculiarly misused terminology. And I think in many ways it's a kind of extraordinarily contradictory term in itself, if we analyze it, that if in any way expressing a point of view that's different, even if assume that BJP, instead of having 31%, had 91%, still the remaining 9% can express a point of view which will not be anti-national. The language has shown a level of barbarity in recent discussion which is hard to explain and understand. Now, coming to your thing, I don't believe in this post-truth world stuff, because post-truth is, like post-Euclidean or post-modern, means that there's something and then we go beyond that. Post-truth is mainly mostly used as anti-truth, really. And so is this wonderful expression that was used by Mr. Trump's campaign leader, namely alternative facts. Alternative facts are not facts. Now, the second point is, you said that if the benefits are outweighed by gain, it's not obvious what the benefits are. Now here, your third point comes in, namely, what I'm describing as the third aspect of your one integrated point, namely that it might have benefited some political group. So if we look at benefit not for India as a whole, for which it's very hard to see what demonetization could have done to help it at all. But if you look at it in a party political point of view, I don't know if it robs the opposition political party of having cash to fight the election, you may regard that to be a benefit. But it would be very hard to describe it as benefit for India as a whole. So I would say that the benefits of demonetization, as I see it as an economist, are pretty much non-existent.
Professor Sen, you made the point, and you said this in an earlier lecture, that demonetization in India was something like an unguided missile. But just as we look, and this is a point being made very effectively by the BJP, that every election that has happened after demonetization, in fact, almost as mini referendums, because the BJP has used this very much in their campaign speeches. The Prime Minister has said about demonetization being for the good of the country. The BJP has won every election since then. They've actually made inroads in areas where they had no presence. So in that sense, economists may not make good politicians at all. And politically, Prime Minister Modi has convinced India, and at least parts of India where elections have been, seem to have voted for demonetization.
They had established in the 46 election, but by 52, it had unraveled. So that, to say that everything that happened since demonetization, it's not even 1 year. It's November last year we are talking about, 8th of November. To say that that vindicated that indicates something of the worth of it, and the economists are mistaken, and the author of demonetization is a better economist than all those people who go around and teach economics in Delhi School and JNU and such. I think before you come to the conclusion, you have to really take a deep breath and reflect on that a bit. Furthermore, as the previous question brought out, the fact that you can polarize people, and some of those things, some of these policies are very polarizing. That success does not indicate that you're doing anything particularly good for the country as a whole. And if you take the view that there's no such thing as benefit for the country as a whole, well, that's what my book is about, right?
Yes.
And so I might as well give it a plug to that, namely, if you want to talk about social interests and social preference, how do you go about thinking about it? That's what I'm trying to do in the book. So I think I can't say I'm persuaded by that argument about demonetization. And the big thing, of course, is that there are vulnerabilities. We have many vulnerabilities. Being easy to excite the Hindu-Muslim tension is one of them, about which Gandhiji was warning again and again and again. Another one, of course, is this basic belief that if something is hurting you, it must be doing some good. Now, that is quite, I'm not very religious of any kind, so I may be wrong in associating it with some kind of religiosity, but there may be something there that you think, my God, you actually reverse the proposition that to do good things you may have to take a lot of cost and a lot of pain to turn it around. If you get a lot of pain, it must be doing some good. Now, as pure logic, it wouldn't do very well. On the other hand, that psychology may work quite well for a while. Actually, from some of the indications are that a lot of people who were in favor of demonetization earlier have already changed their mind on that subject. The newspapers, in case you have noticed, are full of them. said we did think that, we now don't think. But I think that's why public discussion is important.
Of course.
Because you reason, and then you might have supported something, and then you eventually decide not to.
Let's just take some questions from students. And Janisha from Lady Shriram College has a question. Go ahead, Janisha.
Hello, sir. So do you think that a less spending on health and education of a nation makes bad economics? Because what we've seen in last 15 years, we've achieved good growth rate. But do you think it was because of the bad socio-economic planning or implementation that the improvements in the social progress index of India has been marginal? So do you think it can be related?
I think they are related, and that's an excellent question, like the previous one too. I think, you see, I think the difficulty of neglecting healthcare and education is that one thing we know from the history of the world, and I do mean the history of the world, is that they contribute to development in a way that nothing else does. In the Asian context, Japan, after the Meiji Restoration in 1868, they went on, one of the big things that was stated by the leadership at that time is to say, why are Americans more productive than we are Japanese? Actually, it's very difficult to think of a world where the Japanese are not productive, but that is evidently the case at 1868. And the answer is to say that's because Americans are educated, and we are not educated. We need more education, we need more healthcare. We have to build up the human ability to do these things. And they did. And unlike in India, where we have been saying we will have universal education any moment now. Now, Korea, very similar. Taiwan, very similar. Hong Kong, Singapore, China, very similar. The Chinese spend 3 times as much on, well, many more than 3 times, but as a percentage of GDP, they spend about 3%, we spend only a little over 1% on public health care. And their GDP is much larger, so in absolute number it's a bigger gap. And similarly in education. And even though inequality of incomes are similar in China and India, you don't have what you see in India, lots of people not knowing where to go when you're hit by a disease, because you don't have a public health center that's functioning anywhere close to you, and you don't have a decent school to send your children. That doesn't happen in China. That doesn't mean that the Chinese have solved many problems and that they haven't solved, and there are things to learn from multi-party democracy that we have. But in order for the multi-party democracy to be successful, we have to make exactly the question you're asking central to our debate. Namely, make it the case that in order to win an election, education and healthcare becomes important. Now, it didn't figure at all, almost, in the 2014 election. And as long as that continues to be, the chances of change in India is very little, because in China, if about 8 or 10 people on top decide to go some direction, they can do it. We can't here. We have to move the whole population. That's what democracy is. But that means that that question has to be visited again and again. The media would have to have a role. The political parties would have to have a role. It wasn't only the party that won. They didn't raise health and education, but not did the opposition. Well, what were they doing? Why didn't they come in? Of course, in this case, there was a problem that it was ruled by UPA, and they haven't done very much either in this. The fact that the NDA will do even less was still not clear.
Interestingly, Prime Minister Modi is apparently looking at a plan for universal health care. There is also a huge thrust. We've seen recent prices of medicines come down, stent prices being reduced. The question of making medicines accessible to the poor has been one of his major election speech campaigns in Uttar Pradesh as well. And also, his shift from, say, what the BJP has called the welfare economics or the welfare politics of the UPA to a different what they say is a much more results-oriented way to end poverty, linking it with Aadhaar, so benefits go directly to the person who needs it the most, talking about the whole JAM system, bank accounts opening, etc. Are you convinced by these arguments?
The public health institutions are still not functioning. The funding has been stopped. And to say that the states will do it, we're giving more money to the state, would have made sense if the states were not asked to do many other things as well. And it is also when it comes to drugs. There is I'm part of I teach economics and philosophy, but I also teach in the medical school and public health school. And one of the worst things that people worry about is drug being freely available without there being doctors. And that's how you get antibiotic resistance. What you need is not just cheap drugs, you need medical treatment. Medical treatment requires doctors, requires personnel, requires training. Just to say, well, okay, don't gamble, here's some antibiotic, go home and take this amoxicillin and you will be all right. That's the way Indian treatments have gone for a long time. And what you just described seems to consolidate that rather nasty aspect of the Indian medical training, Indian medical practice. Just over-reliance on drugs and under-reliance on medical practice. The biggest problem, of course, in India is the neglect of primary health care. In all these features, you're talking about these rather specialized care and higher level things where, where the normal, very basic childbirth mortality, which still remains very high in India, and as anyone who studied them know, that even very elementary, it doesn't require major drug, even very elementary knowledge and precaution about antiseptics and appropriate use of techniques which are not very costly could make a big difference.